Hi, my name is Alex Odell.
I'm Justin Thompson.
And I'm Heather Houghton, and this is our EDM 310 video book commentary. So today we're going to be discussing how not just educators, but the majority of the world looks too close at test scores and not enough at students' passions and individual learning, and how we should be teaching students off of those things. We're going to have to play into this to keep children engaged, or I feel like learning is just going to, it just can't keep up. Prensky's whole book is about the philosophy of partnering. Partnering includes giving students educations based on their own passions. So, as teachers, we must find these passions and tune into them based on the individual child. They're not concerned about how their other classmates are doing or how they're stacking up against test scores. So it's their passions that really we must focus on.
Okay, well, how do we focus on those passions? And especially if they don't know what their passion is, how do we help them find out?
Well, Prensky, he goes through that in part of his book, talking about it's our job as educators to catch the passions. I mean, yes, we're supposed, we could go around asking, what do you like to do? What is most appealing to you? And that works for a lot of kids, but some kids have no idea what they want to do. But it's kind of our job to go through and guide them, expose them to, passions that others may have. Get the ball rolling in several different areas, and then you can kind of catch what they seem to be interested in.
Yeah.
How do they start designing their projects? What are they doing? Are they writing essays? Are they making videos? Are they making audio tracks? And then it's our job to be guiders of these passions.
Teaching students through that way allows them to grow their own passion, and which later will help them in life. And also, it allows them to be passionate about a specific area, and it makes their studies that much more enjoyable for them. So.
And high test scores don't really have anything to do with this. High test scores are based off of how much are they learning, how much are you doing in a year, and not how much the child is growing.
So quantity over quality.
It is now about what the students want. It's no longer about the class as a whole, but the student as an individual. When you're project-based learning, or Prensky calls it passion-based learning, when you're looking at the individual child and saying, how am I going to engage you so that you will remember and want to learn and participate in your own education? Because I know I've learned so many things that I wish I could remember, but I had no idea because I was being forced to memorize them and regurgitate them.
Yeah.
And there was no application. And the world's changing so fast that what's on the exams they're taking today and the things that they're being taught that are going to be for these exams is half the time not even going to be relevant to what they're learning tomorrow. The world is changing so quickly that students are eager to create things and not to regurgitate standardized test facts.
What ultimately counts is not the student's test scores, it's the skills that the student is learning and going to be able to use in the future.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Test scores now have no way of telling us whether or not they're going to be useful in the future. For students to rise to the challenge, they must be free to learn and create in their own way.
Yeah, but also, on the flip side of that, we must balance these passions and desires with what we as teachers are going to have, the requirements we're going to meet, and the needs that are going to have to be met in our classroom. Right now, we're assessing students off sorting and comparing, sorting how they're doing, and comparing them to each other, who's ahead, who's behind, and that's just not how things should be done anymore. it makes sense for managers and politicians to want to see averages going up and to see supposed progress, but none of this directly relates to the individual student. Grades as a whole may be going up, but is learning on the individual level truly being progressed at the same time?
So we can move to more toward ipsative and peer assessments.
We could even move to real world and self-assessments.
There are a lot of fears with this, though, moving towards this type of education, this type of passion-based learning, and just focusing on the individual students. So many people are afraid that students won't do as well, or that these skills will go unmeasured, because we have been so focused on assessments that will show us results. I mean, if we're teaching students skills, then how are we going to be able to see these results? And that goes back to the new type of assessments also. But there are schools that have, especially charter schools, that have gone towards this type of partnering. And according to those teachers and principals in those schools, they're seeing better exams because the students are actually being engaged in their learning. Prinsky mentioned that there was no data on this yet, but even if data is one of those things that you have to be careful about, though, because you can skew it in just almost any way you want to make it seem to support what you want.
Yeah.
And so this fear is not really justified right now, but I mean, I'm sure in the future there will be more tests. I mean, what don't we do tests on these days?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're engaging them off of their passions, then it's a cooperative process. It no longer becomes competitive. And I mean, it's this competition that's been driving the world to such a dog-eat-dog education competition, when we should be expanding education for everyone. I mean, we shouldn't have this nation versus nation debate.
Or in our case, state versus state.
Exactly. This should be about student with student.
Yeah.
It should not be student versus student. Partnering all together is a cooperative process between teachers and students, between students and students. I mean, it's an equal relationship that is new and it's scary, but it's worth it. I mean, it makes sense. People have done things throughout the entire span of the world that make sense. Both of y'all are history majors.
Yep.
I mean, y'all can go back and look at, things that seem absurd to us right now, but you look at the reasons for it then, and
it makes sense for those people to do what they did at that time.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And so standardization came around in the 20th century. I mean, standardized testing developed out of World War I, and it made sense at the time. But at this point in time,
That makes sense.
these
Outdated.
20th century outdated tests no longer make sense to our 21st generation of students today. So we're going to have to move towards what makes sense for our students. And what makes sense for our students is to focus on them individually and their passions, and teach them and engage them through what they love.
Agreed.
I mean, we just have to take these things and we have to apply them to what we're going to be teaching. So I completely agree with Prinsky when he states that we are looking too far at and too narrowly at what is being achieved through test scores. We aren't looking at student passions right now. We aren't looking at skills that they have to learn to be able to survive in the 21st century.
Yeah.
We were part of that generation that these things didn't get looked at, but I feel like we can change those, and I feel like we can take what we've learned from looking at this topic and apply it to our future and other kids' futures. And so we thank Mark Prinsky for his book, Teaching Digital Natives, which is where this topic came from, and all the research that we had on this came out of his book and from our own personal experiences, and we hope you guys enjoyed.